to defeat Obama. He gets overwhelmingly support from troops.
Hey Sandra, this is Barry. I'm a volunteer. We're calling to remind Republicans about the primary coming up in March. Have you decided which candidate you'll be supporting yet?
You have an awesome life.
Oh no.
This is a tough primary to decide, no doubt.
The phone banking was fun. It was going in, I was like, oh gosh, I'm going to become one of those telemarketers that I hate so much. And I think that that's kind of the perception that a lot of people that I called had. Some people will sit there and talk to you for like 30 minutes, and you will have moments where you're melting people's minds and bringing, because it is election time, people are a little bit more open to discussing these things. They are curious. So when you get those calls where you're actually converting somebody over and making them think, it's awesome. It's unlike anything. It's one of the coolest things.
For Tennessee, the road to Super Tuesday has been a long road. Everything we did for Ron Paul here in Tennessee was grassroots and voluntary. We've been doing it since July, and it started off just a bunch of us going around town putting signs everywhere. And we were just all volunteers. We were all just really passionate about Dr. Paul. We believed in his message. And since then, we've kind of blossomed into an organized grassroots campaign. I mean, last night we broke up into teams and put Ron Paul signs in front of all the different voting precincts. We've knocked on doors, we've made phone calls. We've done all the traditional things that campaigns do. And we've done that without any prompting from the official campaign. It was all because we are passionate about Dr. Paul and his message of freedom. And I really think it appeals to everyone. It doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat, Christian, whatever you call yourself or whatever label you give yourself, it's a universal message. And I believe that's why he's so popular, especially among the young people. And, Dr. Paul's campaign didn't really have much of a presence here in Tennessee, the official campaign. So we just did it ourselves. And I'm really proud of everything we accomplished.
The liberty movement's it's gotten big. The thing that we have to do is connect everybody, really. There's people over here who don't know that there's somebody right across town that supports it, and then, you finally all get together, and that's what we were pushing hard for this Ron Paul campaign. You all get together, and you're like, oh, wow, there's a lot of people that share the same views as I do. It's kind of a relief. It's like therapy, It's like going to my shrink and, telling about my week, and, oh, it was just so stressful, and but no, they get it. They know about these things. They're educated. That's the thing. If someone was to ask me what I thought about a Ron Paul supporter, I would say generally they're educated. They've done their homework. They don't believe the bogusness that's coming out of the media. They question authority, which they should. We should all question authority, because people in power, if they have more power, what do they want? They want even more power. If they have more power, they want even more power. We need to question authority constantly, because they're going to abuse they're going to abuse that authority. They're going to abuse their power. And I think Ron Paul people question authority. That's why we're such a threat to the status quo, because we do question authority. We're not just laying down. We're not the sheeple that they're used to. They don't know what to do. Right now, they do not know what to do with Ron Paul people. We might just take back the United States of America, and they're freaking out. The bankers are freaking out. Congress is freaking out. Senate's freaking out. They're all freaking out, because all the people that have been there all those years, they're about to get the boot.
It's been interesting in the interpersonal relationships. A lot of people have some people are kind of put off. Others are interested and curious because they haven't seen so much passion. It's just, you go on doing your day-to-day thing and go have coffee with your friends and go, or a drink here or dinner or whatever, and now there's this passion that wasn't there. So I think that some people are pretty inspired. Others are kind of off-put because they're not ready to wake up. They haven't had to deal with it yet, and they don't want to.
There's a lot of hesitation because we've been so conditioned to a certain way of thinking that is, completely the opposite of what our Constitution allows us, that you're asking people to think in a different way.
My good friend Barry Donegan brought me the book Ron Paul, Revolution and Manifesto, and I read that book, and it just changed my worldview. I mean, I was ignorant of the consequences of our foreign interventions across the globe. I was ignorant about our money system. And those are just two examples. And it really challenged my worldview, and it challenged how I lived my daily life. I mean, I didn't know anything about honest money. I didn't know anything about the Federal Reserve. And as I began to read and research those and figure them out for myself, I kind of wanted to emulate Dr. Paul in the fact that to try to live a life of honesty and integrity, and how being educated about your history, and being educated about monetary policy, and being educated about how the political system works really is beneficial, because it doesn't allow you just to be a statistic. You can then become a powerful force within your community. I mean, we've been knocking on doors and making phone calls and such for a couple of months now, and the establishment campaign around town has noticed us. You know, they noticed that, you know, we're a force to be reckoned with. No other Santorum, Gingrich, Romney supporters, none of them were knocking on doors or making phone calls. Of course, they had money for radio ads and television ads, et cetera, et cetera. But the thing they admired was our passion. You know, we'd go out in the middle of the night, you know, putting signs up, or we stand out in the cold having a sign wave, or, you know, during the dead of winter, we dress in layers and knock on doors and ask people to consider voting for Dr. Paul. And I think people can appreciate that.
Even though we may seem to be a small group of people, we're very passionate. We believe in what we're doing. We believe it's valuable. We see where our country's headed, and we care about it. We care about our communities and our families and posterity, really. So I think the passion is something that's different, and we're not completely organized, but we are organized. We've educated ourselves about the whole caucus process and how that works, and we've had to learn to cooperate and come together, because it's come together or nothing changes.
Now when I talk to voters, I don't tell them, I tell them to look at Ron Paul's record, and I tell them about his foreign policy because it is so misunderstood. I tell them that he has all of the support of the troops, and that supporting the troops, that's not just tying a ribbon around your tree. You need to listen to what they have to say, listen to why they support Ron Paul so overwhelmingly.
I don't engage fools. I never have. When people make videos about me, I never respond to them. People like it when you get down in the mud with them. And there's a saying I send around, never wrestle with a pig, because people passing by and watching, they won't know who likes the mud the most.
When you talk to other people who don't know the liberty message, when they truly understand that what the Constitution really says, they start waking up to it. It's been nice because the young people in this state and in this country are the ones that really are waking up to the liberty message. It's harder for the older generation because they've been a part of this system all their lives. And so to know of something new, which is actually very old, the Constitution, but they've not known the Constitution, not like the younger generation is knowing it and realizing it.
Ron Paul supporters are some of the most passionate people I've ever met. And I think what makes people so excited is because he talks about things like liberty and freedom. And what human being doesn't enjoy being free, or who doesn't want to celebrate liberty? And they're passionate because they realize there is an alternative to voting for the lesser of two evils. They realize that there's more to life than just, working a job for money that's depreciating, and there's more to life than just kind of being stuck in this two-party paradigm to where if you're a Republican, then you hate the Democrats. If you're a Democrat, you hate the Republicans. You realize that as an individual, you can make a difference. And it inspires people to do things for Ron Paul in all kinds of different ways, whether it's art, whether it's music, whether it's hanging signs around town, whether it's working within the system to be a politician, to try to bring about change like Dr. Paul has done, or whether it's working outside the system by creating alternative media or creating political movements or protest movements. Those are all respectable ways to spread the message of freedom.
There's so many people that I've talked to that because of Ron Paul have started watching people like Stefan Molyneux, who's a big advocate of peaceful parenting. So now because of Ron Paul, people are no longer using force in their relationships with their kids. And because of Ron Paul, people are turning to the internet for their news sources, and because of Ron Paul, it's not just like any other candidate, oh, I'm supporting Mitt Romney. We're getting out there and we're plastering our neighborhoods with our own money to get merchandise, Ron Paul merchandise, where most conversations that we have are about Ron Paul. So a lot of people were like, oh, you're just one of those crazy Ron Paul people, but it's like, no, I'm just awake now. This is no longer just your idea against my idea. This is, we have to decide where we want our country to go, and it's coming to the point that the decision has to be made. Are we going to go towards more centralized government? Are we going to go towards, more of a dictatorship type thing, or are we going to go towards individualism? Are we going to go towards liberty? Are we going to make the decisions and fight for our rights, or are we going to hand them off to somebody else and hope that they do the right thing?
The idea of freedom is ingrained in all of us. We were made to be free. As human beings, we're made to be free. We're not made to be trampled on. We have these rights. That's why I think our Constitution it's a divine document. These are our rights as human beings. And I think that we're all realizing how close we are to losing these rights. I mean, we're on the verge of being enslaved. And, they're not going to make it, well, I say they're not. They could win. That's what sucks. It's the idea that they could actually win for this whole thing or during this whole thing. But we don't want to be slaves. And I think we realize the danger. If we can't get passionate about our freedom, then, we can't get passionate about anything. So I think that's why Ron Paul supporters are so passionate, because we're passionate about our freedom and we want to fight for it. We know the importance of it. And we're willing to stand up for it.
The media writes us off as domestic terrorists or extremists. The fact that we value free speech and the fact that we value the ability to have guns, they kind of say that's extreme or whatever, but it's not. It's just asserting your rights as an individual, and you learn that your rights come from God or your Creator, and your rights don't come from government. And I don't think the government wants people knowing that. I think as individuals realize intellectually, through studies, through research, that they're free. Their freedoms don't come from government. They're born free. They're human beings. And the fact about the information revolution, the internet, the reason so many people know about Dr. Paul is because of the internet, because of Google, because of YouTube. And the information revolution, it won't be stopped, because it's just like it's like a wildfire, and it just spreads. And the reason it spreads is because it's a universal message. I mean, who doesn't believe in the golden rule? It doesn't matter what your faith is or your culture or whatever. Everyone can respect that. And this information revolution is just about becoming human again and being and having practical solutions to our real problems.
It's been nice to realize with the Liberty Movement that it's brought me outside this box that has been, I think the box has been built by the national media, which I think for the most part is a propaganda machine for the political establishment. And so they create the box and they call it Republican, and then they create another box and they call it Democrat. And you can find the channels on TV that represent your box. And then you go and they tell you what to think. The liberty message is a message of freedom because it's freeing us from this box. And that's been nice because I was told how to vote, how to think. And what was going on in 2008 during the election was a thought process of vote for the lesser of two evils. And then my question was to myself and to anybody else is, why are we voting for evil? Start voting for what's right. Start looking and understanding what is the Constitution, what does it say, and how is your representatives, how are they voting?
Many Americans, not just in the South, but many Americans are a product of mainstream media's creation. You know what? I was a part of that group because I didn't know about Ron Paul. I had long since left left-wing media and became a fan of Fox. I also listened to guys like Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Neil Bortz. I thought I was in the know, Bill O'Reilly was one of my favorites. Lo and behold, as I started moving more towards supporting Ron Paul, I saw that even Fox was ignoring the man. I said, hold on. All of these guys that I've been listening to all these years can't even recognize the beauty in Ron Paul's ideology, yet they continue to treat him just like left-wing media talking heads. Something is wrong here. And I realized the something being wrong was myself. So that day, I said, you cannot trust without verifying what you hear from any source within the MSM or mainstream media realm. And I didn't even know what the term MSM meant. Somebody left a comment on one of my YouTube videos, and I said, did they mean to type MSNBC or something? You know, and I asked, what is MSM? They say mainstream media. I say, boy, was I sleeping.
If you're watching Fox and CNN, then you're misinformed, uninformed. Get your media from all different types of media sources. You know, I'm a big proponent of that. Don't rely on any one media source. So yeah, okay, you can watch these channels, but I mean, we live in the internet age. Some people like to call it the truth button. You know, you can get on the internet, and there's plenty of misinformation out there on the internet as well. But if you are motivated to dig deep for yourself, you can find the truth.
It's much easier to have your own opinion on the news when you find it through Google than it is when you find it through Channel 4. Because Channel 4 is only going to give you one viewpoint per moment. You go to Google, you have unlimited options. You can follow the evidence, follow the next line of evidence. You can see what that person's sources as their evidence. Eventually, you can find the truth much faster.
The little bit of media that you do watch, I mean, it's constantly, when you're a Ron Paul supporter, it's constantly telling you that you're crazy. Ron Paul's crazy, and all the people who follow him are nutcases as well. I mean, that's just what you're conditioned to believe. So to be around other people who were off the charts intelligent and who could speak so intelligently about these current events, and for them to tell me that they don't watch the news either, you know, it was validating for me.
Oh, I
would call her a Fox News addict.
Yeah, I would.
24/7.
Yeah, I turned on the TV and it was on Fox News, and I knew all the newscasters' names and all the anchors and when they were on, and I love Fox News. It was, I kept up with the current events, and
she quoted it like the Bible.
I did. I loved it. I actually, the first time I actually watched it was on 9/11. I was at home. I was sick from school, and my mom called me and she's like, turn on the news, and I was like, what channel? And she had me flip to Fox News, and so I guess there was kind of a comfort in that too, because I watched that all unravel from there. So from that time on, I watched Fox News constantly. And that's where I got my, I watched, so embarrassing. I watched on Hannity and O'Reilly, and I loved them. I mean, it was great. And once I really started seeing Ron Paul for who he really is and what he stands for, my whole world just changed. And I remember sitting there watching Fox News, and I believe I called you, and I was like, what is happening?
What is going on? Why are they doing this to him? And
yeah.
I'm like, this is what Ron Paul puts up with every day.
Yeah, I mean, he was doing well in the polls, and they just completely left him out and underestimated him, and just tried to sell him as some kooky person. And it just infuriated me because, after getting to know him and reading his books and, reading about the Liberty people and who they are, I felt like that was just really disrespectful to all these Americans who are trying to stand up for liberty and stand up for our country.
The old media is definitely on the decline, and that's not my opinion, that's just a fact. The empirics show it. Newspaper circulation has gone way, way down. They're taking a huge hit. television, cable news, audience numbers are going down. CNN is really hurting right now. People are turning the TV off and they're getting on the internet. They're getting on the internet because it doesn't tell them what to think. It's just a wide open portal, and they can explore, and they can let their curiosity drive them, and people like that. The other thing is the internet isn't controlled by anybody. So the best ideas just rise to the top. The ideas that are going to be most interesting to people rise to the top. Back in the 90s, if Congress wanted to pass a law and they didn't want you to know about it, it was easy. You only had a couple channels, especially before CNN, you only had a couple news channels on the television, and you did have radio, but they could just easily distract you with a celebrity scandal, some big kidnapping, some scared up catastrophe like violent video games or West Nile virus. I know that's a more recent one, but what was it? African killer bees was a big one from back in the day. And then they'd pass the Patriot Act, or they'd pass CISPA, or they'd pass something evil that no one would really like if we knew about it, but no one was paying attention. Now, someone will know about it because we have the means to pay attention. They'll blog about it, they'll tweet about it, they'll update their Facebook statuses, and then other people will see it and they'll spread that information. And if it's relevant enough to us and it's outrageous enough, it will float to the top and we'll all hear about it. And so that's amazing. The other super cool thing about the internet is how people are literally using it for revolutionary activity in the world. These Arab Spring revolutions were primarily coordinated on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And not only did they coordinate it via these social media, they used social media to sort of keep the world's attention on what their governments were doing, which made a huge difference as well and maybe saved a lot of lives. So it is a real game changer. Old media isn't going to disappear, but it's definitely already changing to sort of respond to these new times, and it's definitely going to become less relevant. The radio didn't disappear because of the television, but it's a little less relevant. We use it a little differently, and it's not as powerful. And television isn't going to disappear because of the internet, but a lot of things are going to change. I think they're going to change for the better.
The first thing is, throw away the remote control. Get rid of the TV. I didn't have cable or satellite for like 3 years after that. I have it now just for small things. I don't really watch, I don't watch the news. I don't really watch a lot of TV anyway, but I got it for small little events like fights and stuff like that. But I know it's all internet. And people are like, oh, the internet's not real news. That's propaganda right there when they tell you the internet's not real news, because we can decipher what on the internet's real news and what's not real news. We sift through the BS. We know what's up. So, I go online. I find the good sites online. There's some very accurate sites that don't fill your head with propaganda, and I read that news, and then I cross-reference it, and I'm checking different sources. And you know what? You can find the truth on the internet. I know the older people out there, they're like, they believe what they're hearing in the mainstream media, that, the internet's full of crap. Well, yeah, there's some crap on the internet, but the mainstream media is completely full of crap. It's all crap. So I mean, they don't tell you that. They don't tell you how screwed up they are. But no, the internet's where you should get all your media. If you want to watch your TV, like occasionally I'll watch the news to see what they're saying. I want to see how stupid they are, and I can take like 20 minutes of it. I'm like, I can't listen to Bill O'Reilly or Sean Hannity anymore, because they're so full of it, and it's garbage.
When something happens and something that a lot of people might get excited about, sometimes I'm like, well, let's kind of see what's really going on here. What's the real deal? We look at the Arab Spring and what happened with Gaddafi, and then you look behind the scenes and you look at the articles and you find out, well, Gaddafi was actually telling the truth when he said that some of the leadership of the rebels were Al-Qaeda, and we're giving material support to Al-Qaeda when we were bombing Gaddafi. Some of those. I just kind of look at things differently. I don't just take the first sound bite from the news. I try to find out what's going on before making a judgment about things.
Well, the way the mainstream media paints conflict and it tries to make it into a Hollywood movie always. A great example of this is the propaganda film Kony 2012, where they tried to really oversimplify an extremely complex political scenario into being where there's one little sort of Darth Vader-y bad guy. That's what our media wants there to be, a Darth Vader, a Luke Skywalker, and a Star Wars type storyline when there isn't one. You know, and sometimes they get things so wrong that they make us look like idiots. Like the Russia, South Ossetia, Georgia conflict, which happened during 2007 or 8. The media portrayed that as if Russia struck first, when in reality Georgia struck first. That's just bad information. I mean, you know, we could have almost wound up in a war with Russia. That was what Georgia wanted us to do, which could have been a world war. It could have exterminated a large number of millions of Americans, and over a misreporting. You know, it got to the point where there was some footage online you could watch of a Fox News reporter who was actually running from Georgian troops who were firing on him, making excuses for them. He was saying, oh, they're just so humiliated from how badly they've been treated by the Russians that they're now opening fire on reporters. When really they should have said, the Georgian troops are opening fire on reporters. They're completely out of control. You know, and he was making excuses while he was actually ducking bullets. They were trying to kill him. I thought he's really committed to the story.
Georgian forces now have begun to fire at journalists with pistols. They're obviously irregular, undisciplined, angry, and humiliated.
I think the information revolution and all these different outlets that people have, you know, fans of Austrian economics, Ron Paul supporters, and so forth, yeah, I think that fundamentally changes the game, if you will, because, you know, when Fox News does something ridiculous, you know, they show the applause or the booing from like the previous cycle's CPAC convention or what have you. You know, I mean, just do something crazy like that. Some Ron Paul person can make a YouTube of that, they're clearly documenting it, so it's airtight, and then post it, and then it gets around Facebook and Twitter, and after a while, you know, 50,000 people see it. So the joke is on them, and we're all laughing about it. Whereas before, you know, a lot of people wouldn't have known that that's what happened. You know, and so like they just can't get away with some of the things to try to contain and just paint some, you know, some wacky candidate as, oh, this fringe guy who has no support. Well, we know that that's not true.
This was one of the really interesting things about the Veterans for Ron Paul March on the White House back on President's Day this year. You know, we saw mainstream media coverage there. They had the cameras there. Like I said before, the big peacock was there, you know. And they seemed to be filming for the duration of the march and for the silence that was observed in front of the White House. But, you know, as the days went on, the mainstream media never released 1 second of that footage on, you know, Fox News or CNN or NBC or CBS, I mean, you know, whatever. But the closest thing to a mainstream media source that I saw cover anything about that march was from Russian television. And they actually did a pretty good 2 to 3 minute piece. And, you know, it just made me think, it just dawned on me, you know, if I was a Russian citizen living in Russia, especially if I'd never been to the United States, and I knew that Russian television had covered a gathering of veterans marching on the White House and turning their back on the president and in formation crying out revolution. What would I think as a Russian citizen was happening in America, especially if America's own media didn't even cover the event? I mean, you know, you put yourself in those shoes. As an American, if we heard today that hundreds of Russian veterans had organized a march on Red Square, on Moscow, what would we think was happening in Russia? Ron Paul was right. America is in revolution. I'm just glad to be part of it. I feel blessed to be part of it. And we can all be part of it. That's the beauty of it as well, is we can all choose to be part of it.
Run, Paul, revolution, run, Paul, revolution, run, Paul, revolution.
what I've seen in this primary season before the Republican National Convention is I found it very odd because in South Carolina during the primary, which I think was back in February, there was 1,000 dead people to vote in South Carolina, which since then I've heard nothing from the mainstream media about, who were the 1,000 dead people, who did they vote for, what did anybody do any kind of investigation? I mean, we're talking about our president, and it's a pretty important matter. So why in the world have we not fully investigated that? Why has the Federal Election Commission not come in and done a thorough investigation and then allowed the mainstream media to know? So it's very, very frustrating to hear that. The other things I've heard that I've been frustrated about is, especially early on in the primary season, was in Iowa, in a couple of very populated precincts, they didn't count the votes from the primary at the Election Commission offices. They ended up taking them to another location and counting them that was unbeknownst to some of the election officials in those precincts. And I thought, why? There was a lot of, just a lot of what looked like fraudulent activity. And, if you look at those places, especially Iowa, Ron Paul was doing very well. And from what I heard is those precincts that were heavily populated, Ron Paul was doing extremely well.
The crowds that Ron Paul has been pulling in at his rallies in all the states, and I'm especially impressed with California because I'm from California, and California has been a traditionally liberal state. But he must have been at this point to like 7 or 8 different colleges all up and down the state. And at Berkeley and Chico, he's pulling in like 5, 6, 7, 8,000 people per rally. I mean, and there was this one picture that I saw up online where these people were up in a tree, and the tree had like 20 people in it looking over the fence in the rally just so they could see him because they couldn't even get in. It was so crowded and packed. And the media doesn't cover this. It's insane. And it's a little amusing because they've got to be frustrated because they've worked so hard on controlling the message, and still, everywhere he goes, thousands come to see him. He's an old man. He doesn't have to do this. He could be enjoying retirement, but he's not. He's out there fighting to the bitter end.
It's interesting because we are at the brink of, I think, destruction as a nation, as a republic. And if you look at history and you see these great empires of old, whether they be the Persian Empire or Babylonian Empire, Greek Empire, Roman Empire, the British Empire, they have stretched themselves out militarily, kind of like ourselves. And then all of a sudden they taxed themselves economically. And then what happened to their empires? They imploded. And that's exactly where we're headed. And it's so crazy to me because I want to see from the mainstream media and from just everyone more urgency that we're about to lose this empire. We're about to lose our republic. And it is an urgency. And to see, things in the media about, this Hollywood star doing this or this politician's in trouble for some kind of adultery. These things take away from what do we really need? What do we need from investigative journalists? What do we need from our mainstream media? We need facts. We need to know. We need people asking questions. Why are things so bad? And did we really turn things around? We gave $700 billion to the banks to bail them out. Did those banks help small businesses? I'm a small business owner. I can tell you right away, they did not. And this is the problem here. We have a system that is set up to fail the people. And it's a system that I think is purposefully being set up to fail the people. And I think it's purposefully trying to destroy our republic. I think there's people that are opposed to the liberty message, and they're the people that are truly in power.
The establishment has tried all sorts of things to disenfranchise the Ron Paul people, shut them out. I mean, I've heard horror stories, and even the same day I had my caucus in my county, then we go home and we hear about the St. Charles County caucus, which is a horrible, huge mess. They tried to disallow people to use cameras, and the crowds went wild and angry, and then they brought in police to enforce that rule. And then when they started breaking the rules and they tried to set up their own chairman, their own rules committee, which all those are supposed to be, you know, the chairman's supposed to be elected by the people. Then they shut down the caucus and threw everybody out. And then when they tried to reconvene the caucus according to rules, police came in and arrested 2 people.
Can I have an officer remove him and then camera? You still figure out the report?
The St. Charles one in Missouri that they just straight canceled, that was a joke. I mean, that's an embarrassment. If that happened in Tennessee, it went on the board I was on, if we had canceled the caucus event, and we had a contentious caucus in the one that I won, you know? Ron Paul supporters took a lot of seats, but they didn't try to cancel it on us. They let us win the seats that we won. I mean, our party was exponentially more fair than the one in Missouri. You know, we're almost lucky compared to that. It was much hardship as we had to go through. But the party is generally more fair than what it could be. The Republican Party is designed to be taken over by grassroots movements. It's designed to empower the grassroots. That's why the caucus process is so complicated, because they've made it possible, because they understand that the Republican Party is driven by grassroots activists. It's driven by door-to-door voter contact. It's driven by phone calls, voter contact. If they can't get people to do that for their nominee, they're going to be in bad shape. And right now they're in trouble because the activist base for the Republican Party is the Ron Paul revolution, and they need to appeal to it, not fight it.
Shockingly enough, though, at our caucus, we got our choice for chairman to be the chairman of the caucus, which was a positive sign. And actually by a narrow margin, we got our slate of delegates and alternates, so it's 22 delegates and 22 alternates. Our slate won. It was the patriot slate. And they're all Ron Paul people who value liberty, are in this fight for good.
The guys who catch the legitimate voting fraud and expose that is one of the most important roles in our society, and one of the most demonized people too. Because on election day, nobody wants to believe somebody else will do something like that. But when you witness it happen, you gotta turn it in. You know, our elections are important. It's important that people have confidence in the elections.
I am allowed to address this committee. All right.
How can you, in good conscience, be trying to shut out others? I think they're scared. But I find it very ironic. It's almost like, yes, it angers me, it irritates me, but it's also very ironic that first they say, well, almost Ron Paul doesn't exist. You know, according to the news media, Ron Paul might as well not exist, and he's not. They act like he's not a threat. You know, they say, you know, he doesn't exist, but then why are you doing all these underhand things?
In Washington State, when they said that they didn't have insurance paid for a Ron Paul rally once the Ron Paul supporter took the chair position.
Now, I would like the Ron Paul campaign does not have authority to rent this room. They have not provided insurance for this building. And Ron Paul campaign is Cameron Smilich, is a member of the Ron Paul campaign.
She's not paid by the Ron Paul campaign.
You're the backup and you do not have authority to run the meeting in this building. You will have 10 minutes before this building must be vacated. The choice is the Ron Paul campaign did not raise it. They did not take insurance.
Do what? She's not a part of the Ron Paul campaign.
Republicans show up, Republican caucus, is that your problem? Or the problem is they're conservative Republicans showing up at your caucus?
As I said earlier, unless Tamara can provide insurance for this building and an agreement to rent this building, we are going to have to vacate.
That is not.
Ron Paul is a member of the Republican Party. This is a Republican caucus.
Point of clarification, yes. What does being on the chair have to do with liability for insurance? Nothing. Okay.
The Ron Paul campaign.
It doesn't become a candidate's rally because someone who favors a particular candidate won the chair position in a normal electoral process that happens every time. That's stretching it. It's using rhetoric to basically take your ball and go home. And I think when you watch, it's losing politics. I think the middle of the Republican Party, when they see the take the ball and go home crowd do that, they're like, I'm not for whoever that is anymore. So as awkward as it was to watch, it was probably a good thing for us because people want to support somebody who's being basically screwed over. And in that event, it was obvious they were being screwed over. You know, it was obvious that the establishment wanted to take their ball and go home. That would be like if the results started coming in on the primary and then the Republican Party said they were just going to cancel the primary and there was going to be no more candidate. You know, it's just outrageous. Nobody would do that.
I'm now going to announce the winner of the Maine GOP presidential poll. And that winner is Mitt Romney.
Excuse me. According to the Maine Republican Party, whose chairman you just saw there, Mitt Romney won Maine's caucus with 39% of the vote. Ron Paul came in second with 36% of the vote. The margin of victory for Mr. Romney was a razor-thin 194 votes. So case closed, right? Ha, not by a long shot. Remember there's 3 Maine counties I mentioned earlier, Washington County, Waldo County, and Kennebec County? Turns out that lots and lots of Republicans living in those 3 counties who voted in the presidential preference poll never actually had their votes counted by the Maine Republican Party. Republicans in Washington County postponed their caucuses on Saturday because of a snowstorm they expected to hit the area. And even though they are planning to vote instead this coming weekend, that's when they postponed the caucus to, the state Republican Party has already said, in Washington County, your votes won't count. They said no additional votes will be counted. So sorry, Washington County, you don't count. Republicans in Waterville, Maine, which is in Kennebec County, did vote as they were supposed to last week, but their vote total, as you see here, shows up, look at the right, on the right there, shows up as a 0 in the Republican Party's official results. That's not because nobody showed up in Waterville. It's apparently because a contact person in Waterville didn't phone in the results on time, even though the vote took place on time. Even though the state party now has the results from Waterville, sorry, too late, we're not counting you either. Then there's Waldo County. Even though nearly all Waldo County towns held caucuses on February 4th, which was a full week before the Maine Republican Party announced its supposedly final results, here's how most of Waldo County's votes, look in the official Republican Party's results list. 0 votes, 0 votes, 0 votes, 0 votes. Why is Waldo County not being counted? Who knows?
Maine was over the edge. It was obvious that the state party wanted Romney to win so bad that they were willing to, take steps ahead of time to cancel elections and make certain elections less important than others. And once again, I think that benefits the Ron Paul revolution long term, because I think in the state that's going to give the state party a way to the Ron Paul revolution, because the activists there, once again, who are not for Ron Paul, who lived in those areas that got downplayed, basically their vote doesn't count. They're angry. They wanted their vote to count, even if their area was going to go more for Ron Paul, and even if ultimately the state went the other way, they wanted their vote at least to for sure count. Because what about next time? The precedent is huge, and I think that when that's the thing. It's like the dark side of the force. You know, bad karma. If in politics, bad karma comes to people who don't play fair, who are mean to other people, who don't want there to be a fair chance for, you know, because ultimately it's democracy. Ultimately it's the people voting in majority over the other, and the vote needs to count.